for a defense attorney. Said, well, you know, this is a real good tool for dysfunctional husbands and wives. All right. The degree of public acceptance of the material in the community. Well, that's what the trial's about. We don't know what the degree of public acceptance is until that jury goes in the box and says so. That shouldn't even be allowed. The prosecutor say, wait a minute. That's improper evidence. It's irrelevant. That's a decision for the jury. The defense attorney's invading the province of the jury right now. We don't know whether or not it's accepted until this jury says so. Then it talks about period interest or absence thereof in the advertising. Look at this one. The purpose of the author. Creator, publisher, or disseminator. I can tell you the purpose. Money, honey. And on it goes. And then worst of all, look at this. Person convicted of obscenity shall be fined at least $500, but not more than $1,000. Imprisoned in the county jail for a term not to exceed 6 months or both. Now, can't apply any RICO law. If you had one, you're not going to deter any multi-million-dollar industry at all with that kind of a law. It's got to be changed. And I have drafted something on the subject of obscenity that I'm leaving with Dallas. Okay. Let's go on here and talk about child pornography quickly. Let me see if anything else I want to show you on here. Somebody this morning, I think it was the dean, referred to Oklahoma County prosecutor. He was on the video, Robert Macy, remember the man that had the little black string cowboy kind of tie? Okay, he has written a letter, and we've made a copy available, and Dallas has a copy, and I think it's in your packet, isn't it? He tells in that letter what a skeptic he was about obscenity and its effect in the community. And he wasn't really sure whether it was a cause or an effect. But you know what happened? A lot of citizens went to him and said, we want this stuff prosecuted. And he started doing it. And you know what happened? As he said on the video, 5 years straight in Oklahoma County, the rape rate went down about 22%, 25%, 26%. It's around 25 to 26%. You know what happened in the rest of the state? At the same period of time where there were no obscenity prosecutions, the rape rate went up 22%. Do you know what that amounts to when you put it together? Almost a 50% reduction in the rape rate. And when your county officials say, we can't afford to do this, you tell them you can't afford not to. When your state legislature said we can't afford to make this a felony crime, you tell them you can't afford not to, and you tell them about the over $17 million the federal government has taken in fines and asset forfeitures, and they didn't even have to take most of them to trial. Okay. And believe me, the longer it goes unprosecuted, the harder and harder the material gets, and what we're seeing over computers today is the most deviant of the conduct out there. I mean, there's stuff that's unimaginable. I'm only going to touch very lightly on the child pornography, on the need to change your state law, because they did a good job in 1993, but they need to go further. For those of you who weren't here last night, very quickly, child pornography has no First Amendment protection whatsoever. It doesn't require the 3-part test for obscenity that I gave you in Miller. You don't have to consider the material as a whole. If it's a 1,000-page book, all it takes is one picture of a child engaged in sexual conduct, either alone or with someone else, or a lewd exhibition of the genitals. That's all it takes. This industry was driven underground when the federal law was strengthened. You distribute, produce, use a child in child pornography, and you transmit it in some way using an instrumentality of interstate commerce, you can get 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine for each count. And that is why the industry that used to sell some 250 magazines over the counter quit doing it. And the industry went underground, and it's primarily made by pedophiles. They're obsessed with it, and if it weren't for pedophiles, this stuff wouldn't exist. They're obsessed with it. They make it, and they use it as a tool to desensitize children, to educate them as to what they want. They engage the child in a sexual act. They videotape it or photograph it. They've now got some new material. They use that material to blackmail the child into silence. They use that material to get access to other children or to trade it for more child pornography. They network with each other primarily through computers. One of the things you've got to do is go to your school board and make sure that if you've got computers in your schools, that they're going to block access some way when they get on the internet so that these children can't get on these adult bulletin boards that are available on the internet. Just a few months ago, the police in England, through a tip from our FBI, found at Birmingham University the largest inventory they'd ever seen of child pornography had been loaded into the university computer on internet, which is linked to 160 countries. Now, we got to make sure that our children who are getting on this information superhighway aren't getting on adult bulletin boards. Because children have, with email, talked to pedophiles who have set up meetings and who have sexually abused children as a result of it. Now, thankfully, your state in 1993 changed a very weak state law on child pornography, child sexual exploitation. They still call it sexual abuse of children. A child, generally under your state law, is defined as under 18. That's very good. And as you go down through it, if the child is under 16, they can get 50 years. I love it. And a $10,000 fine. Otherwise, they can get 10 years for each count and up to a $10,000 fine. However, you still, like we in California, need to correct down here, letter C. A person convicted of the offense, down here, of sexual abuse of children for the possession of material, it's only a misdemeanor. You know what the Supreme Court has said about that? The only way we're going to dry up the production of the material is to destroy the market. The market is for those who possess it. Those who possess it drive the production of it. And so that needs to be made a felony. Also, what needs to happen with your state law is that you ought to have an asset forfeiture provision in it, meaning that when there is a conviction and they get a pedophile, and let me tell you something, they've got state-of-the-art computer equipment that is way ahead of anything police departments have. If you have a forfeiture law in your state law, they can seize everything in that guy's house after there's been a conviction that was used in any way in relation to that material. The computers, the printers, the modem, everything with it. And it then can go to law enforcement use. Any money, anything else that they can prove was used in the offense. And again, I've drafted a law to cover that, and I'm going to be leaving it in Dallas, and hopefully you know, they passed it in 93. You go back in 95, you say, bravo, great job, but here's what else needs to be corrected. We need to make this possession a felony, and here's why, and we need an asset forfeiture law. Because I know a detective in the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office who didn't have any computer equipment to get online and track these people. You know how he got his equipment? Busting some of them. He got the court as a even as a condition of probation after they serve sentence to have to give them all the equipment to this department, and it's dedicated to this particular section. And he says, if anybody in our department comes and tries to take it away from me, he said, I call the judge. And I say, you want to talk to him? Or he says, I get my computer back. That's great. But your state has done a good job in this area, and they're to be commended for it, because you had one of the weakest laws in child pornography. It was terrible. Okay. Child pornography cases. You've got a copy here, child pornography cases. It used to be judged by the Miller test, no longer true. In 1982, the U.S. Supreme Court gave a landmark decision that provided much greater protection for children from sexual exploitation. And that is when they removed it from the Miller test and said child pornography can be a separate offense from obscenity. It only requires proof of visual depiction of sexual conduct involving minors. In other words, it can't just be printed material describing it. It can't be a drawing of it. It has to be the actual molestation of a real child. On and on it goes. We've got a real concern up at the top. You've heard about, perhaps, those of you who maybe listen to Focus on the Family. There are two cases, one from the Ninth Circuit and one from the Third Circuit, that are before the United States Supreme Court. United States versus Knox, the government, through the Justice Department and the Solicitor General, reversed themselves completely and argued in such a way that you thought they were representing the defendant. It was absolutely appalling. We filed an amicus brief in that case. The government asked the court to send it back to the Third Circuit to review the law under their interpretation of the law. So it went back there, and when it got there, the government said, now send it back to the trial court so that they'll review it under our interpretation of the law, that the child has to be nude. And they even said the child has to behave lasciviously. Ask a 7-year-old what lasciviously is. Because of the public outcry, and here again, the Department of Justice was inundated by hundreds of thousands of calls and letters from the public. The Congress censored the Justice Department and Janet Reno for its action. President Clinton told her to go back and draft tough laws. Federal law is tough enough. All we need is somebody to enforce it. But anyway, the Third Circuit refused to remand it to the trial court, and they reviewed it again and said, bad news, you still lose. Now he's appealed again to the U.S. Supreme Court, and if the court accepts again a review, we're going to file another amicus brief there. United States versus Excitement Video. I had the opportunity to be there during oral argument. We submitted a brief in that case. In that case, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals struck down the federal distribution laws on child pornography, saying it didn't require an element of knowledge on the part of the defendant distributor. And the government, again, took a very liberal interpretation, and their argument is that the government has to prove that the defendant distributor actually personally knew that the material contained a minor. That is not the way the statute reads. It's not what Congress intended. It's a poorly worded statute, but it's not what Congress intended. And so we filed a brief in that case arguing for a much stronger and tighter interpretation of the law. And we were very pleased to see that in 15 seconds into the oral argument by the Solicitor General, the Chief Justice interrupted him and started questioning him from our argument. And it consumed 40 minutes of the argument time. And so we're confident by the questions of the justices that they're not going to buy into this. But if they do, then we're going to have to get Congress to draft something more explicit than already exists. But that is another reason why you need the toughest possible state law, because we've got an Attorney General and a Solicitor General that seem to care more about protecting the rights of child molesters than they do children. And let me tell you something. If the children of this country are not safe, none of us is safe. Our Bill of Rights has always been interpreted to protect the weakest among us from the abuse of the majority. It's another instance of how we are devaluing life in this country, even the life of children. And so that's why you need to help and work with Dallas in getting even your state law tightened up even more. Okay. The child pornography that was underground is coming back up above ground. I have with me, and I'm not going to read it to you because it's so horrendous, but an indictment in New Jersey has just occurred in which an individual and his girlfriend left this country, went into Mexico, and transmitted child pornography into New Jersey. It's the worst of the worst. I mean, it is described as a mother opening up the vaginal area of an infant daughter for the camera. It is a description of a 5-year-old boy being sodomized. It is a description of a little toddler who has been abused so bad, it says, and there's the blood to prove it. There's a description of a little boy who's being spread while a man inserts the sexual organ of a dog. That's what's coming across computers. And that's why you gotta have the toughest law imaginable. You gotta protect your children when they're on a computer, because if you've got a modem in your home, they can get on one of these adult bulletin boards, because the question is, are you 18 or above? And you hit the key and there it is. And if they've got your credit card number, they can get this material, they can reach and start interacting with a pedophile. Okay, I'm going to go to harmful to minors material. Here your state law needs a lot of work. Display or dissemination of obscene material to minors means that quality of a description, exhibition, presentation, or representation in whatever form of sexual conduct or sadomasochistic abuse when the material performance taken as a whole, as I showed you last night, the test for harmful to minor materials is the Miller test as applied to minors. Its dominant theme appeals to a minor's prurient interest in sex, and then it goes into the depicts or describes sexual conduct in a patently offensive manner, which adults say is not suitable for minors. It lacks serious literary, scientific, artistic, or political value. If the court finds a material performance has serious literary, scientific, or political value, for a significant percentage of normal older minors, the materials or performance may not be found to lack such value. That's a distortion of the test. The question is, if it lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors, all minors, it isn't to just be judged on whether it's okay for older minors, but for all minors. The description in number 2, material, is incomplete. This ought to go into material that is disseminated by computer. Also, when you then come over, is this the right place? Oh, there it is. When you come down here to the dissemination law, it says a person having custody or control or supervision of any commercial establishment or newsstand may not knowingly or purposely display it. Okay, now that's talking about a public display and saying you're not guilty if you put up the blinder, racks, or cover. But why in the world are we limiting it to just commercial establishments? Because even here, if you come down and say present to a minor or participate in presenting to a minor with or without consideration, well, why do you see? You've limited this by this up here. It only applies to commercial establishments or those who operate newsstands. Well, what about, some perverse neighbor who's showing your kids harmful matter? That should be included in the law. That needs to be changed. And if I didn't say so, if I forgot, your state obscenity law, in addition to making it a felony, you want to have an asset forfeiture in there. I'm not sure if I covered that or not. Okay. Something that we didn't cover in great detail, and then I'm finished. Why do we want to be so concerned about keeping this stuff out of the hands of minors? Here's an article, Children Who Molest Children, a Growing Trend. This is by the FBI. According to the FBI Uniform Crime Reports, State Department of Justice, Bureau of Criminal Statistics, it says in 1990, the forcible rape arrest in the United States for children 10 to 12, there were 346 arrests. That's of children raping other children. And under 10, think of this, under 10, there were 89. On and on it goes. And it's gone up every single year. And who do we say is the largest consumer group? Well, among the largest? Boys 12 to 17. Here we got California, 10-year-old boy is accused of sexual assaults. Police said the boy told them he learned about sodomy from pornographic magazines. Philadelphia Inquirer. FBI statistics show the number of 10 to 17-year-olds arrested on rape charges has doubled since 1965. 10 years ago, there were 22 treatment programs nationally for juvenile sex offenders. Today, there are 755. Gee, I wonder why. Another one, stories of children who molest other children. Here's one about a boy. He got his brothers involved. Bill said by showing them pornographic magazines and movies. He said he often used knives to force them to have intercourse with him. This is a child. Clarion in Ohio, headline. This is what a judge said. X-rated videos as harmful to kids as guns. In that case, they had two boys, 13 and 11, who sexually abused neighbor boys after they got into their parents' pornography stash. Another case, on and on it goes. Case after case after case. Anybody who says that this material doesn't have an effect on people, why in the world are we spending billions of dollars on public education? Because we think that good material has a positive effect on people. Well, my goodness, isn't it logical then, whether we can prove it conclusively or not, to say bad material has a bad effect on people? Of course it does. Unless you have some particular questions, I'm finished. Thank you for your
Are there any questions for Jan? But asset forfeiture laws, would that be like this drug thing we have now, where it's It's,
These anything they used
That's right.
in relation to the crime, the car. or
but
whatever.
aren't there problems with that? I mean, aren't some people appealing that?
Well, here's the safety about this law, is that you can't seize anything until you have the underlying conviction for the obscenity or child pornography offense. Then the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was some kind of the instrument, for example, with the child pornography, was used to help produce it, the money, the car, the video, whatever. And so that all has to be proved before the seizure can occur. It's not a pre-trial seizure, it's after a conviction.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. Well, we're running late. We've got to be out of here by a quarter after. They charge us a little bit more because they're keeping the janitor. So first thing I'm going to ask is if some of you could stay and help set up the chairs, help him set up the chairs. We get up here a little earlier and help him in his work. I've got several things to cover, so we may have to pay for the 15 minutes. And if we get out before 12:30, we'll have to pay again for another 15. You know more right now, from what Jan said, and those who were here last night, know more right now than most attorneys. We're not talking just ordinary citizens, but most attorneys in Montana about obscenity law. And because of that, as Dean Smith said, and others have said, you have a certain responsibility. Nobody hears this anywhere else. You won't hear it in the media. The media is here and took a picture. Guess what they're going to say? Only about 18 people attended this conference. They'll hit that real hard. And they, by the way, I'm having a debate. They call it at the League of Women Voters on the 4th, I think, at 12. I'd like a good audience there, by the way, if you can make it. At the City Hall. Guess who I'm debating? Ruth Thornton, the one that writes the article in the paper. That's why we have the coverage we have in the paper, because most of those articles are just terrible, slanted the other way.
Where are you saying is Ruth Thornton sitting then? Is just an editor, or is she?
She's in the opposition, opposed to the ordinance. She will be the spokesperson for the opposition. That's, I think it's the 4th. I'll have to look it up. I believe it's the 4th at City Hall. But I need to have some friends there with good questions, because we're going to have a lot of the other side of it, I think. I will look that up. If you can make it, I'll look it up and give you the information. Pardon?
November the 4th?
Yes, is that a Thursday?
Friday.
Okay, it's the 3rd then. It's the 3rd. I got to pick my wife up Wednesday. Yeah, it's the 3rd on Thursday.
Thursday. What time?
12 noon. And it's going to be mainly this issue. They want to cover the county ballot issues. There's only one for the 3 lots, so that's what it's going to be mainly about. Jack Heron, would you stand? I'd like to introduce Jack Heron. He's a representative, House of Representatives from Kalispell area, and he can be credited with a lot of success on the child pornography legislation in 1993. Him and Representative Jim Rice championed that through, and Jack will be handling the obscenity issue and the other 2 bills, and he needs your support. You can see how controversial this is, and it's amazing with this issue. You'll get what Jan's saying, and then somebody else will stand and testify to the total opposite and say that it's true. You'll have a psychologist that says, there's no question about it. Look at the studies. Look at what I do. This is what I have. I can prove there's a connection. And then another will stand up and say, oh no, I use this in my practice. The hardest stuff, the worst stuff, I give to my people to help them out. And so the only thing that will influence them is to hear from you. It's the only thing we've got. If we don't have that, we lose. Dean Smith laid it out really well last night. The success in the state could very well depend upon what happens in Valley County. He said last night, I believe, if I quote him right, he said, if we lose here, he said it's your fault, and he said if we lose in the state, it's your fault, because we didn't get it back here. And that puts a big responsibility on us to get the word out. he said 99.9% of our Valley County residents would vote for the laws if they understood them. And I agree. I put it at 80, but he's probably right, 99%. And it's hard to get the word out. You know, the only way we can do it is by speaking to groups and having you speak to your friends, getting together with others to get this out, because it doesn't come any other way. I invited all the candidates to these meetings, by the way, and we had one show up last night. And I'd like to mention that was Dick Green, and he's completely with us. As far as I know, we had no other candidates show up. There's some voter guides in the back to show how our national representatives voted, put out by the Christian Coalition. We'd like you, if you would pick one up and take a look at what they voted on. It'll help you a little bit on this issue. We need help. We've got just a few days before the election. Who knows how to vote on the ballot? If you noticed, it's very confusing for somebody that's not read up on the issue. We have some signs to put up along the highway. We need bodies to do that. Excuse me, and we need property owners along the highway that would allow us to put them up. We'd like to put a couple of them up by Florence and a couple on the East Side Highway. But we need your help. It may look different in the media, but there's not very many of us. When we have our monthly meetings, we have 4 people maybe, or 3. We need more participation from that, from you. We need more help. We need your input, your talents, your thoughts on what we can do better, how we can do these things and accomplish them. We need financial help. We're in the hole in this conference on a great amount, but we are in the hole. In fact, we're still in the hole from the other conference a little bit. We can get out of that. You know, if everybody, Dean Smith mentioned this, if everybody that cares about the kids would give a pledge $1 a month, this battle would be over soon. I can guarantee it, this battle would be over soon. We're fighting the ACLU and we're fighting the booksellers. And if they see a challenge, they pump thousands of dollars in to fight it. And if we get these little pledges sometimes, if we're going to win, we've got to have steady pledges, and they don't have to be great pledges. But if everybody would give a little bit that doesn't hurt, we'll win it. And we'll be able to bring Jan and Monique and others in to address this issue and tell the truth on it. We'd like to get some radio spots out this next week. We haven't been able to afford it. Like I say, we're in the hole. It would only probably cost us $100 to get 3 or 4 spots a day. And I don't know how effective that is, but we could get them around the noon hour, or around the news hour, and I think we'd be quite effective with it. We'd reach some people anyway. We need letters to the editor. We don't have much time. Short letters saying, I support these laws. We need these laws to protect our families. We're setting community standards, remember. I think there's been, other than my letters, there's been one other letter in there. I know there's been 2 written that weren't printed. But we're setting community standards. And if people read the paper and see that it's silent on this issue, and if this ever goes to a jury or something, they're going to remember that. We need Speakers Bureau members. We've got some Speakers Bureau trained here, and we want to do it statewide, but anybody that would like to speak to groups on this issue, we've got 2 or 3 that desire that, and we could train. We have a series of videotapes to train speakers, and so we'd like that help too. You know, I wondered, we had 44 people here yesterday. And when I come this morning, I thought, you know, if we had a meeting here about preserving elk, this room wouldn't have been big enough. Besides, we could build a big bronze statue, you know, seen the one in Missoula. If it was about the ducks, there'd be all kinds of people here, all kinds of money here. We're talking kids. Now, I know that quantity isn't the point. We've got quality here, and I appreciate you for being here, because I know you'd rather be other places. I'd rather be with my family, and I know you would too. But by being involved in this and helping our children, you are with your family. I'd like to just, I've told this before, and I'd like to tell it again why I'm involved. Did you?
No, I was shooting a fly.
Just to sum up here, and then we'll leave. You might remember the mother in America during World War II, whose son was on a ship sailing in the bloody collar known as the Pacific Theater. And she was praying that he'd be all right. Each morning she would arise from kneeling in prayer and serve as a volunteer on production lines, which became lifelines to these men out in battle. Could it possibly be that a mother's handiwork might somehow affect the life of her loved one, her son, out in the ocean? All who knew her and her family cherished the actual account of her sailor son, Elgin Staples, whose ship went down off Guadalcanal. Shouldn't tell a story, could it? Staples was swept over the side, but he survived thanks to a life belt that was proved later on examination to have been inspected, packed, and stamped back home in Akron, Ohio by his own mother. The efforts we apply today may very well mean the same to our children and our grandchildren. That's why I'm involved, and I pray that we can all join hands and work together and have a victory on this issue, not only in Valley County, but in the state of Montana, and work with our national leaders to turn the problem around. And again, I'd like to say thanks for being here, and thanks for giving us your time. And I apologize for not asking him sooner, but Kay Bergman, would you give the benediction?
Our Father in heaven, we do thank you for the opportunity to be here for these special presentations this morning. Grateful for those who have taken much of their time and their talents to be here to instruct us and to give us guidance and direction on how we might pursue this special need and activity in our county. We pray that thou bless us, that each one of us in our own way and the resources which we have at our disposal might do our part to help others to come to knowledge and understanding the importance of these matters and the tremendous impact that they have on us as individuals, upon our families, and upon our community. We would ask thee to bless good and righteous people who desire that which is best, to be inspired and blessed and directed in voting appropriately in the coming election. Pray that thou will bless those who have given of themselves and their time and talents on our behalf, that they'll be protected and watched over and blessed in their travels. This we ask in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
You know, Dallas has asked applause for everybody here but him.
Where does the chair go?
Let's find the